Hey, Rebel Bankers, this is your host, Chris Noggle, and welcome back to the show. I am really honored to have today's guest on because he's not only a personal friend, he's a rock star, and you're going to hear all about his journey. We got Steve Rozenberg on, and let me just kind of sum up Steve for you real quick. Number one, just take no bullshit kind of guy, just gets down to business and makes things happen. But, he was an international commercial airline pilot in a prior life. And, he had that safe and secure job, or so he thought he did, until 9/11 hit. Then he realized this nice and cozy, safe and secure airline job wasn't so safe and secure. So you're going to hear his journey of how he went from that career to what he's doing today and the mindset that was involved in that whole thing. That's what we're going to hit. But before we get into Steve's story, let's talk about all of you. Let's talk about your journey to becoming a Rebel Banker. That journey is involving a lot of different things, including you getting knowledge. That's why you're here today, to learn something, to pick up some golden nuggets. But you see, the person that told you that knowledge was power had it all wrong. Knowledge isn't power. It's the application of the knowledge that's power. So let me challenge you, because I love putting people on the spot. So if you're listening to this, I want to give you something for free, but you got to take action. So you got to go to my website, chrisnoggle.com, N-A-U-G-L-E. And when you go there, I want you to do two things. Number one, I want you to register for our weekly wealth webinar series. It's free, okay? But for that, I'm going to give you something for free. I'm going to give you 2 books completely free, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery and The Private Money Guide. You just go on the website, one more click after wealth webinar, and click the free books. You see, it's so simple. Everything I just told you to do costs you nothing but your time, but it is you participating in knowledge that you just got and taking action on it. Take that little step and use that every day in your life and watch how fast you reach the success levels you want. So, all right, Steve, here we are, man.
Good to see you, man. Good to be back and on stages, getting on podcast shows, kind of getting the emotion back in alignment with our normal lives, I guess you could say.
Now it's crazy, it's been, I don't even know how long it's been. It feels like an eternity, year and a half. I'm in New York, so it's just completely shut down here. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's wide open and it's just chaos. You go to a restaurant, you can't even get a seat anymore. It's kind of messing with me a little bit. I gotta tell you.
Well, and I think the last time I saw you, we were both speaking in San Diego right before everything shut down. So it was, I believe it may have been February-ish, March-ish timeframe, because I had just come from Phoenix and you and I spoke together. And it was shortly after that, the kind of world came to a screeching halt. So yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a while.
Yeah, that was definitely the last hurrah, because that was I spoke there, and then I was speaking at one of our events the day that the president shut the country down, and that was it. So yeah, it's crazy, man. It's giddy up and go, but times 10. But real quick, what I'd love for you to do is just tell my audience a little bit about what you do today. You're a contributor for Bigger Pockets. You've got your own mastermind. It's better coming from you, but you do so much. So give them a lowdown of your business today.
Sure. Yeah. And just one caveat that you'd said earlier, I'll correct, is I still am an airline pilot. So I still fly for the airlines on top of everything else that I do. But yeah, so I had a property management company. I sold that company, exited to a larger company, and kind of the second half of my life, I guess you could say. And the second half of my life is I'm trying to give back and educate. And I'm using the last 20 years of my knowledge and experience to help investors kind of overcome some of the challenges that we all deal with as investors. And when I say challenges, it's not a physical challenge. It's the mental challenge. It's changing the mindset of driving down the street and saying, is this house right for me or is that house right for me? Depending on your goals and your strategy. So what I do now is I try to help people, being an influencer on Bigger Pockets and other shows and platforms, to just help people understand that, it's not rocket science. There's a successful recipe, like everything. It's like baking a cake. You don't put the frosting on and then put it in the oven. There's a recipe to bake a cake successfully. Well, there's a recipe to be successful in real estate, but there's also a recipe to fail. And I know this firsthand because I've done both recipes, and it's much easier with the successful one than the failure one. So what I do now is I really try my best. And anyone who follows me on social media or anything, they know I'm out there just giving as much educational content as I possibly can to help people avoid the missteps and the challenges that everybody goes through, but there's no manual. Like there's no manual when you first got involved or when I got involved in real estate and said, hey, here's the Chris Naugle manual to success, right? There's for you, for your goals, for your life, like that doesn't exist. And we're so used to being employees and we're leaving a job that we don't want to have that we really don't know what to do. We want to get away from the constraints of a job because we don't want to be told what to do. Well, you get that and congratulations. There's no one to tell you what to do, good or bad. So now you're out there in no man's land and you're like, what do I do? It's like, hey, this is what you wanted, right? You wanted your freedom. Congratulations. And that's why I think a lot of investors fail. So just kind of summing up, what I really try to do is just help people understand that there is a method to the madness. There is a successful system if you follow it.
Absolutely. And, with the airline stuff, I see, photos all the time on all your social platforms because you're very active on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah. And, I see a bunch of photos of you, above the clouds, just like looking out over the horizon, top of the world. But then the next ones, I see all your real estate. I see your mastermind. So, I think in my mind, I knew you were still a pilot, but I just know you more as the real estate guy. It's weird, but yeah, it's just, I think my mind has a hard time articulating that you're actually capable of doing all these different things.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, Chris, is I get a lot of people that will reach out and they'll say like, when are you going to quit your job? Why don't you quit your job? And my answer back is, why should I have to quit my job? I do what I love to do. I fly a Boeing 787 aircraft all over the world for a major airline. Why would I quit that? Like that's a dream job for me. Where is it written that you have to be miserable and you have to quit your job to be successful in real estate? Why is it not an and? Why does it have to be an or? And I tell people, if I'm miserable in my job, that's a different story. And then I would take steps to exit that job. But just because I have a certain decimal point or a comma or in the bank account, or I have 4 walls and a roof and I own so much real estate, where is it written that I have to stop doing what I love doing? And a lot of people have a hard time. They're like, oh, I just assume that you would quit your job. I'm like, well, that's incorrect. You don't have to quit your job. And so a lot of people have a hard time because I'll be here and then maybe I'll be in Buenos Aires or I'll be in London or Tokyo, wherever. And they just have a hard time relating the two. But I'm like, I think of myself as the perfect proof of saying you can do whatever you want, because the whole time I grew a management company up to 1,000 properties and sold that business, I was an airline pilot the whole time. So you choose every day what you want to do and how you want to be successful. My big thing is don't tell me you can't do something. Tell me you choose not to. That I will accept. Telling me you can't do something that's failure talk. And if you want me to say okay so that you feel better, I'm okay with that. But don't lie to yourself and let me try to get me to say, hey, it's okay that you want to be a loser and you don't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym and do what you got to do. Like, I just don't accept that kind of self-talk that we give ourselves.
It's a mindset problem. It really is. And you said so many important things there. And I just want to reiterate a few and tell one quick story is, I see this all the time. It seems like everybody's in a rush to quit their job. I hate my job. I'm sick of punching a clock. They got it all wrong, man, because it's, Grant Cardone even says that, if you've got a job, don't focus on quitting your job, focus on making additional sources of income. Whether you like Grant or not, he has that right. And you mentioned it, but here's the way I look at things. People go to work. If you were to go around and just interview a whole bunch of people and you just said, why do you go to work? The most common answers you're going to hear is, well, I have bills to pay. Well, I got to take care of my family. I have to. No one has to do anything. We are fully in control of what we do and what we don't. So you don't have to go to work. You don't have to pay your bills. And everyone that thinks that way, that they have to do something and they're going to work, is going to be miserable in their job, no matter what job they have. So let me pick on what I think would be one of the, the kind of hardest jobs. Let's just say a giant waste management company. You're one of the low end guys that works on the line, and the recycling trucks come up, they dump all the recycling goods on a giant conveyor belt, and you're the person that has to sort through all of this. This is a real job, and I know people that do this job. So there's 2 people on this line. One guy got up in the morning, got mad, just isn't happy, can't wait for Friday, can't wait to punch the clock to go home every day, shows up, he's miserable all day. There's poopy diapers mixed in with the cardboard. And every time he gets it, he's like, oh, I can't believe people, they suck. But then there's a guy on the other side of the conveyor belt. This guy wakes up every day happy. He's going to work for his job. He doesn't make a lot of money. And, you know, when that poopy diaper comes across, he just laughs. He says, you know, they must have picked the wrong can, and he just goes through it. There's one difference between that guy across that's complaining and miserable and the other guy. They both make the same money. They both have the same job. They're both doing the same things. The difference is the mindset. The guy that's happy goes to work every day to solve a really big problem. And every day he goes there, he is thinking of the end result of what his job, that the other guy thinks is the worst job on earth, what his job is doing to benefit society, the world. He is literally saving millions of trees. He is directly responsible to whether or not a tree gets cut down that had a koala bear in it, and he knows that. So his job to him is about solving a really big problem, and because of that, he finds joy and enjoyment in that job every day. The other guy only cares about himself, and because of that, he's in a me mindset, and he is going to hate any job he's ever in because he's not focused on what problem he's solving. I didn't mean to tell that story, but it is so true. It's much mindset.
And I'll give you an example of something, you know, that I encounter. So, you know, I do one-on-one coaching, and I mentor a lot of investors and stuff. And, you know, a lot of people are coming from the job industry, and they want to be successful investors, and they do it because they want the lifestyle and freedom or whatever the case may be. And so my first question is well, what do you want? I ask them, I go, what do you want out of this whole thing called real estate? And they'll want a tirade for the majority of them. And this is very common. And you probably have to, for 5 minutes, they'll tell me, I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to have a 9 to 5. I don't want this. I don't want, and I'll listen to them, and I'll just sit there and listen, and they'll be done. And I'll tell them, I didn't ask you what you don't want. My question is what do you want? So let's try this again. And this time I want you to think about your answer before you spit it out. And I want you to tell me, what do you want in life? And so many of them will sit there and they'll go, you know what? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I've been so focused on what I don't want. That is the majority of my life. Being miserable, telling myself how miserable I am. I'm like, look, there's two ways to look at this. You can look at this as what you don't want, or you could go, you know, it's the Tony Robbins. You're running away from, you know, pain and fear, or you're running towards pleasure. So many people are running away from pain and fear. And I ask them, I go, you're so busy running away, you don't even know where you're running to. Do you think 4 walls and a roof is going to make you happy? You think having a $500,000, $1 million, $5 million in the bank account is going to make you happy? You can buy a lot of cool shit, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to make you happy. And so don't assume that getting away from one thing, running away, if you don't know where you're running to, you know, happiness is that definition that you have to define on your own. Nobody can define it for you. And, you know, if you get 5 houses, you'll want 6. You get 6, you'll want 20, whatever the case may be. You have $1 million in the bank, you'll want 1.1. That it's not, and I tell them, I go, it's not like you're going to break through this glass ceiling and one day you're going to go, oh, I'm so happy. This is my life. I am so glad. I've been miserable up until today, but now tomorrow I will be happy. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Your brain does not function that way. And for you to think that, you are going to be sorely disappointed when you reach that destination, because you're going to be like, this is it. This is all it is. I mean, and so I get a lot of people that ask me, they say like, you're an airline pilot, you sold a business, you own all this real estate. Why do you keep doing this? I'm like, my question to you is, why don't you? Why don't you keep going? Like, where does it say that I have to stop because I've been successful, because I've chalked up that? Like I tell them, I go, success is the journey. Like, you're missing the point. The journey is what I'm enjoying. It's not the destination of where I'm going. When I get there, sure, I'll be happy. I'll have financial means, but you're missing the point. And everyone bypasses that journey, and they don't understand that that is actually the gem in this whole thing, at least in my opinion, for what it's worth.
That is so important, you know, and it's called the arrival syndrome. And a lot of people suffer from this. And I don't mean just people that are just getting by. I mean, like, billionaires suffer from the arrival syndrome. And what that arrival syndrome means is you set a goal in your life. I want a Lamborghini. I want a big house. I want 100 units. And then when you reach that, you're just like, okay, I hit my goal. Like, you've arrived. And then the only place to go when you've arrived, if that's how you live your life on what you were saying, is back down. You're always going to ride it back down. You can't. The arrival syndrome is, I think, one of the biggest problems for any level of success, because people don't even know what they're working toward. You just said it. And you know why I know this? I was that guy. Like I was the guy that was interviewing with the mentor, and the mentor said the same thing you did, Steve. He said, why do you do what you're doing? At that time, I was flipping 20 houses a month, going absolutely bonkers, losing my mind, chasing the dream of having our show on HGTV. And literally, like, I sat down with this mentor. I was so miserable. I was making great money, but I was just miserable. I didn't have freedom. I didn't have time. And he says to me, he says, all right, so before I can work with you, I need to know one thing. I said, oh, piece of cake. He said, I need to know why you work so hard. And I spewed off a whole bunch of reasons. I was above that. I didn't spew off things I didn't want, but I spewed off a whole bunch of things. And every time I'd give him an answer, he kept saying, no, that isn't why you do what you do. And I kept doing this. I got really frustrated. And I'm like, maybe this guy's not the mentor for me. And finally I said to him, I said, listen, like, I don't know what you want from me, but like, I'm telling you why I'm working. He says, no, you haven't told me anything. He said, you've told me a bunch of lies that you've taught yourself to believe. He said, I want to know why you actually do what you do. And what he was getting at is and I didn't realize this, and it was so simple. What I was working for was the ability to live my perfect day every day. But how could I live my perfect day, even one day? How could I live the perfect day if I have no idea what that day looks like? So what I did is over a month-long period, I actually sat down and I drew out and wrote out my perfect day. And most people are like, why would it take you 30 days? You realize how much happens in your day? From the second you wake up and take your first breath in the morning and look to the second you close your eyes in the evening, you know how many things happen in your day? And if you had to articulate and describe every second of that entire day with detail and specifics, could you tell me what your perfect day looks like? The answer would be probably not. And that was my answer. But I did it. I did the exercise. And when I had full clarity of that perfect day, I was able to literally reverse engineer it and start working toward it. Now, and I'm just going to give you an example. A lot of people are like, oh, well, that's easy for you to say, or, this, because one of the things in my perfect day, when I first opened my eyes, outside of like the colors and the curtains and everything, I had that all mapped out, but I hear the ocean. Okay. That's one of the things in my perfect day. I hear the ocean and I can feel the ocean breeze. Now I live in Buffalo, New York. If you don't know this, there's no oceans around here. So how can I feel the ocean breeze and hear the ocean if I live in Buffalo? And most people are saying, if you're chasing your perfect dream or your perfect day, you can't live in Buffalo. Wrong. Here's what I did. Your mind is the most powerful thing. We don't even use any of it, but it's so powerful that it doesn't know the difference between Amazon, that little Amazon cube that all of you have, playing sounds of the ocean crashing, and a fan blowing air at you. And then what you actually do is you just burn essential oils that smell like salt. So now all night long, my brain, as long as I'm in the right mindset, only thinks that I'm sitting on the ocean, smelling the beautiful salt and literally listening to the ocean crash. So like everybody thinks that you got to be there to have that. You don't. You just got to believe in it. You got to dream. And I didn't mean to go long in that, but like,
no, it's important.
So important. Like too many people fall short of their dreams because they think that their dream has to have this certain thing. Your mind is so much more powerful than just that thing. Like any of you that have a dream to buy a fancy sports car, everybody's getting Lamborghinis. I don't even like Lamborghinis, but everybody's getting them. Like if that's your dream, what happens when you get that Lamborghini? Are you done? Are you just like, all right, I got my dream? Most people are. Like that's it. That's all they set for their goal. And when they get there, they don't even know what to do next.
I'll give you an example, and then we can move on to the other things if you want. But like you, I've been mentored by many influential people in different realms. But one of my mentors and coaches, he told me one thing, and then he led to something else. He said, Steve, he said, did you know, and you know this because you're an athlete and you are a very accomplished athlete. He said the highest rate of depression and even suicide are astronauts and Olympic athletes. And he said, because they reach the goal and they reach the pinnacle. And then once you go to the moon, what do you do next? You get the ticket, you get the parade, everyone high fives you. He goes, you don't get another trip to the moon. You don't get another trip to the Olympic Games normally, right? So he told me, so based on that, he said, Steve, if you want some advice, he said, listen, he said, you're going to be very successful in your life. He goes, you're going to have all the cool toys. He goes, you're going to buy the cars, you're going to buy the houses. He goes, you're going to have all that stuff. He goes, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on buying the memories. And he goes, this is what I want you to do. He says, take a notebook. He had 3 of them, and he showed me he had 3 of them. One of them was memories, meaning all the places in the world that he wanted to eat dinner with his wife. In Greece, looking out at the Mediterranean at sunset. So a specific restaurant, time of day, time of year, camping out in the African safari. He had all these things. He goes, that's one thing. He goes, the next thing was all the concerts that he wanted to see and where he wanted to see them. So he's like, I want to see the Rolling Stones in Wembley Stadium. So he had all these things that he wanted. So he's like, buy memories. He's like, because you can't take that shit with you. He goes, there's no U-Haul behind a funeral and behind a hearse. He goes, it doesn't exist. So he goes, buy memories. He goes, write them down, and your brain, as we know, your reticular activating system, your filter will find those, just like the ocean breeze, And he said, and I can't recall what the third notebook was, but it was all about the memories, not the toys. It's like, because he goes, that gets old, right? He goes, the toys get old. He goes, then you'll just buy a nicer toy. Maybe it's the next newer version, but he goes, it's the memories. That's what you want. And I was like, wow. So I have that. I have a notebook where I write down the things that I want to do. Now, luckily, I get to travel around the world, so that's a little bit easier for me. But, concerts, one thing that I wish I would have done is I wish I would have gone to see Tom Petty in concert. I never saw him. Well, now I can never see him because he's no longer with us. Those are things that I'd like to do. So, and again, what I always tell people when you're just kind of bringing this full circle, when we talk about real estate, what I tell them is, listen, real estate is a vehicle. It's an asset vehicle, just like stocks, just like intellectual property. Real estate is a vehicle. That's like, you don't buy real estate to buy real estate. You buy real estate for a reason. It's to give you the lifestyle and the freedom to have the life that you want to live, to not be able to worry about time or money, because money is a renewable source. Time is not. And so I tell them, I go, you use it like a vehicle. It's saying that you want to own 10 properties. That's like saying, I want to jump on the freeway. Where are you going? Like, you got to have a destination. And people don't understand that. They think the goal is to have the 10 properties. And I was one of those people. And maybe you were like, I want to be busy to be busy. But it's like, for what? Like, you've got to remember that is just a bridge to get you to the destination. And if you don't know where you're going, it's like, I use the analogy of Disneyland, right? When you want to go to Disneyland out in Los Angeles, when you get out of the airport and you jump in the car, you've got to you take the 405 to the 91 to the 105, and you get off on Disneyland Drive. That's your strategy. So that could be, I'm going to buy and hold, I'm going to flip 2, I'm going to hold 1, I'm going to burr, whatever the strategy is. If you were driving to Disneyland and you got lost along the way and you pull over, someone's standing on the side of the road and you go, hey, can I get some directions? What's the first thing they're going to ask you? Where are you going? And if you go, I don't know, I'm just driving, they're going to go, well, then I can't help you. But that's what so many investors do, starting out and even experienced. I had 40 something properties and I had no idea where I was going. I was going somewhere. Unfortunately, I was going the wrong direction, very, very fast, the wrong way, because no one ever asked me, why are you doing this? What's the goal? So, I mean, I learned that way, which is probably why I have such a burning desire to help people avoid the headache and frustration. But it sounds ridiculous to get in your car without going somewhere. But that's what so many of us do in the real estate world or any business world, right? We're busy to be busy. You are flipping 20 properties a month going, the hell am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? And I think it's a challenge that I think we all deal with, because there's no one there to tell you whether you should or shouldn't have a goal and what you should be doing.
No, that's very well said. Speaking of memories, so we've kind of danced around it, but can you tell everybody just a little bit about, like, how did you go from, the commercial airline pilot into real estate, and like, what did that journey look like? Did you fail a lot? I mean, what did you do for money for your deals? That's a big common barrier for people.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, my journey into real estate, and let me just say, I never, ever wanted to be in real estate. I didn't know anything about it. Growing up as a little kid in Los Angeles, all I ever wanted to do was fly airplanes. That's all I wanted to do. And I got hired with a major airline at 25 years old. So I was one of the youngest people hired. I was the second youngest person hired at this particular airline. And I had the life, right? I was living in Guam, flying all over South Pacific and Asia. I had the best job in the world, and it was the most safe and the most secure job that you could ever imagine, until September 10th, 2001. September 11th, towers, we know the horrific tragedies that happened to our country. 13 hours later, I was given a furlough notice that basically said, hey, Steve, thanks for being this dedicated employee, but that safe and secure job that you thought you had, it's not that safe, it's not that secure, and we don't need you. So good luck with 50,000 other pilots on the street. Well, I can tell you is, that's a very, talk about a gut punch, right? Your whole life, you're studying to do something. You're so specialized. I can fly a metal tube around in the sky, but I couldn't even drive a truck because I didn't have the qualifications. So you become so focused and specialized in a field, unless I'm flying a plane somewhere, I'm pretty much useless to society. And you realize, like, what am I going to do? This isn't fair. Like, I didn't cause those towers to fall. I didn't do that, but now I am basically getting the lashing because of it. And so that was really, really hard for me to realize, like, man, like, I've got to step up. So I started looking at what do people do that have jobs and careers, and everything started leading towards real estate. Just every book I read. So I was like, okay, well, maybe real estate is something. Like, maybe I'll do that. And I was on the list to be furloughed. So there were 1,200 of us on the list. And every month they would slice off people. So they were systematically, it goes from the bottom and it works its way up. And they would just keep slicing people every month. So you can see it coming. And so I'm in a race for time. So I was reading a book a week on real estate, everything that I could read. I signed up for mentorship programs. I learned, I joined clubs. I did everything I could. And I kept getting punched in the face. I kept getting ripped off. I kept getting lied to. And I just could not, I'm like, I don't understand like this, but for me, I didn't have a choice. Like it's when your should becomes a must. Like, my back was against the wall and I had to figure this out because I was out of options. And every month it's chopping closer. So what I ended up doing was I ended up learning how to wholesale. And that, it wasn't called that at the time, and it was fairly new in that real estate realm. But I learned how to negotiate, and I got very, very good. And I started taking classes on negotiations, and I started taking classes on NLP and communication. And I realized the wealthiest people on the planet are communicators, not doers. And so I started really understanding this. So I got really good at wholesaling properties and negotiating. And I got so good at it that I made enough money to buy an apartment complex or go into partnership on a complex. And that was kind of my intro. So I never owned any houses yet. I got right into the apartment world. And we had an apartment. It was a 39 or 40 unit building with there was 2 or 3, maybe 4 of us at the time. And we sold that. And that's when I started buying houses. And it was me and my business partner, who were still partners to this day. We started buying houses. And the mistake that we made was we thought we were the smartest people in the world because I knew how to negotiate. I could talk myself or him into or out of any type of situation, convincing ourselves that a deal was a deal because I wanted it, because I just thought we should own as many doors as we can. He comes to me and says, hey, I found these great deals. Nobody, there's no competition. We can buy them for 40, 50 grand and rent them for 900 a month. And we're looking on paper. I'm like, these are amazing deals. Why buy one? Let's buy as many as we can. So in about a year, we have 20, 30 of these things. And then we realize why people don't own these properties. And so now we have this hornet's nest of just chaos going on, maintenance, delinquencies, our eviction rates at 30%. And this is going on for like a year, 2 years. So we do what 2 people that think they're the smartest people in the world would do. We buy another 20 properties thinking that's going to solve the problem. And it was like gasoline on the fire, and it just exploded in our faces. And I always tell this story. My wife told me, she goes, if you buy another one, it better be nice because you will be living in it because you suck at buying houses and you need to stop. She's like, you are no good at this. And I'm like, no, and this is a good lesson for people watching, that you get this tunnel vision. And I'm thinking to myself, I can fix this. Everyone out of my way. I can fix this. I don't need any help. I can run this thing. And I was just burrowing deeper and deeper in the hole. And finally, it was I felt like an addict. It was almost like, okay, we need an intervention. This is not going to work. And that's when we sat back and we had, then we had 35, 40 properties. And then we're like, okay, we have a problem. And then we started looking at it okay, we have 3 choices. Choice number 1 is we sell them all. Choice number 2 is we get a property management company to manage them. Choice number 3 is we self-manage them. Well, I was still flying for the airlines. So during that time frame, I came within 30 numbers from the bottom. I wasn't able to hold the base that I was in, which was Houston. I was in Cleveland, I was in Newark, and I was bouncing everywhere, still doing the flipping, still doing everything all on my own. And I realized that was actually, I don't want to say it wasn't worse than losing your job, because obviously that's bad. But coming that close to the bottom every day, waiting for the mailbox and wondering if I'm getting that letter for 2 years was very, very tough. I can tell you, it was not a good feeling, because I didn't know, like, do I spend the money to go buy properties, or what do I do? Like, do I keep this money in case I don't have a job, in case that letter comes tomorrow? So I was in this no man's land, and people were like, why don't you just buy the house? I'm like, because I don't know what's coming. Like, there's a variable that I don't like not being able to control variables. And that was a variable that I could not control. And then if I did, let's say I lost my job, a lot of people, they were going to Asia, they're going to South America, flying airplanes. So I'm like, well, shit, am I gonna have to go to Korea and fly for a year or two? Like, I don't know what to do. And I didn't want to put myself in a position where I'm tied to a certain area. So for me, flipping, I was making 20,000 a pop. I was, every time I flipped or wholesale the property, I was doing good. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep churning this money until I can stabilize. So what we ended up doing is we could not sell them, because this is about 2010, 2000-ish, 2010, 2011-ish. Nobody could get a loan back then, as you know, right? So we couldn't sell them. So then we go hand them to a management company. No management company wanted them. They're like, we don't want these properties. We're like, what do you mean? They're like, you guys will never make money. These are basically shithole properties, and these are too time intensive for what we would charge you. Good luck. And there's like 3 or 4 companies, and we're like, I'm like, what do we do? So the final solution is we have to figure this out. So he and I sat down for about 6 months, and we plumbed the infrastructure of how we would want our properties to run. And we ran it like a business for the very first time. And we kicked out about 70% of our deadbeat tenants. And we started basically running it. And what happened was we had other people that we knew, locally here in Houston, approach us and say, hey, could you guys manage ours? And at first we're like, hell no, we don't want your problems. We barely figured our own out. But then we started thinking, you know what, maybe this is a scalability. Maybe we could scale. So the first thing we did is we went to a business coach, and we said, look, here's what we did. Here's what we have, and here's where we think this could go. And he looks at it, and we ran the numbers, and he's like, okay, you've got opportunity, you've got a market, and you've got scalability. You have a business. You two are not the smartest guys, and you will be bankrupt in 6 months if you try this on your own. So we hire him on the spot. So he was the best closer. So we hired this business coach. So we don't even know that we have a business. And that is June of 2012. December of 2012, my business partner quits his job full time, and we push the chips all in. We burn the ropes, we burn the bridges, everything. We're in. We take that company over the next 7 years, and we become the fastest growing company in Texas. We scaled to 1,000 properties. We multiplied into 3 cities. We had, virtual assistants all throughout Mexico. I mean, we were just off to the races. I started speaking nationally. I did tours through Australia. We just put ourselves on the map. And every single week we went to that business coach, and we were coached every single week with that guy. And every time we'd leave, we'd be like this big. We're like, oh my God, we're morons, but he kept pushing us. And I learned so much. And he didn't know anything about real estate. He taught us business. And so coming back as what I do now after, we ended up getting acquired by a much larger venture capital backed company. So we exited, did very well. But I tell people, we never identified ourselves as property managers. We were business owners. We just happened to own a business that managed real estate. And that was the difference. So I try to teach people now when we're talking about real estate, it's 4 walls and a roof. You're the CEO of that business. That is more important than worrying about anything else. And that's what I really try to instill and ingrain in people, that you need to look at this from a business standpoint. You need to learn finances. You need to learn numbers. You need to know accountability of what's going on more than anything else. And so that's kind of full circle of what I've done. But it's been a wild ride. I can tell you that, my man.
That's insane. Like, you were managing 1,000 units?
1,000 properties all over Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth, Texas.
You are batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I was still flying, and I was still flying with my airline job.
That's just crazy.
I mean, here's something that people need to understand. That's the beauty of real estate and business, is that one word called leverage. And you can leverage people. You learn from you, right? You learned leverage of money and how to use money. I learned how to leverage people and systems and virtual assistants. That's the most successful person in the business is not the hardest worker. Mm-hmm. We all think being the hardest worker, like we tell ourselves this story, if I work hard, I'll be successful. There's no correlation to hard work and success. If that were the case, construction workers and day laborers would be the wealthiest people on the planet, but they're not. And we know that, but we tell ourselves that lie because we want to feel like, hey, at least I'm busy doing something. But you're not busy doing anything. You're actually being the most unproductive, because I tell people, I go, if you had a CEO that was in charge of you when you own a rental property, and I said, okay, your goal is to close on 5 properties this year. And I ask you, okay, give me your KPIs for the week. Tell me what you did. And they go, well, I kind of went to the lumber yard and I kind of looked at this and I did that. And I'm like, wait a second, your job is to grow your company. I want to know what you did in growth mode. I want accountability. And if they don't do that, I would tell them, listen, you may be the problem of the growth. You are the bottleneck. Maybe you need to be fired from your position because you're not doing what you need to do to be accountable, because you don't have a boss. You can do what you want to do. That's the reason why most people have a job, is they need to be told what to do to be held accountable. And as you know, most people that are entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, they don't have anyone to tell them. So there's no one to tell them if what they're doing is right or wrong, because they don't know. And that's a big challenge with investors out there, is they don't know what to do because they don't have the rule book to be successful. And that's why I think your book, like the stuff you give, it's amazing that you give this out. I mean, you're giving them a multi-million-dollar success strategy and going here. And you know as well as I do, the majority of people, they don't do anything with it, but it's right in front of them. It's like, look, this works. This isn't magic. This is the how you bake a cake recipe. Read your book, bake the cake, you will get the cake at the end. It's really that simple.
It is, but people, when they see something simple, they're like, oh, that sounds too good to be true. And then they find every reason to find out, I don't know how they do it, but they find every reason out there in their research to not do it. That's why they don't look at it and say, well, this could change my life. How could I do this? They say, why should I not? And if you're looking for why you shouldn't do something, I promise you one thing, 100%, you'll find it and you won't do it. But, Will Rogers said it best. The biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. It's what they think they know that just ain't so. That's the problem. And you were talking about it. Now, you work with a lot of real estate investors, from entry level all the way to very, very highly successful real estate investors, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
What would you say the biggest problem with all of them is? I mean, is there a big difference between the new guy and the guy that's been doing it for a while? Or did their problems evolve? What would you say, maybe the top 3 problems that they have?
Well, that's a good question. So you see rituals and you see trends in people, just like you said, waking up in the morning, right? I have rituals of what I do, right, in the morning. One of the biggest determining factors that I would say is the deselection process. And what I say by deselection process, it's what do they say no to? Many people think that when you're first starting out in real estate, you need to try everything. I want to flip, I want to wholesale, I want to burr, any new acronym, I hear these new terms all the time and I'm like, what are you doing? And so the problem is it's too much white noise. And so I'll give you an example. I've got a student of mine that he reached out to me one day, and he's a police officer, very high up in the police department. He's like, man, I need to bend your ear. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, man, I'm not doing what I need. He's like, I'm in this mastermind, I'm in this mastermind, and this mastermind. And he's like, I'm not getting anything done. I'm like, so you're about the depth of a can of tuna as opposed to an oil well. I said, the key to being successful is not saying yes. The key to being successful is saying no. And it's a deselection process of what you don't want. I said, you're thinking throw everything on the plate and then pick off what you want. You got it all wrong. Empty the plate and decide what you want to put on it one at a time. So I said, you're in these masterminds. So one guy's like subject to mastermind. Another one's an apartment mastermind. I go, does the subject to guy do apartments? And he's like, no. And I go, does the apartment guy do wholesaling? He's like, no. I go, so they're vertical. They're doing what they do specially. You think that you need to be doing all of them. And again, you're only going to do one thing good, or you're going to do a bunch of things crappy. So going back to your question, the one thing that I've noticed that people that are successful is they say no more than they say yes. They are focused on what is important to them and what that one thing is. And that goes back to writing down your goals. It goes back to, revisiting them daily. I revisit my 90-day goals every morning. I rewrite them down every morning. That's what I do. What's the one thing I have to do today to get to that goal? And it's a matter of focus. And so I think that's the problem, is a lot of people do not have that focus because they don't know where to put that focus. They don't know what they should be doing because they don't know what their goals are. They don't know where they're going. And I say this a lot because I was victim of this. I was a successful, I was an airline pilot. I by all definition, I had a successful career, but I wasn't successful in real estate because I never had a goal. And the people that I talk to, they have a goal and they focus on that goal. And if anything gets in their way, they say no. Nope, I don't want that. I just want my one thing. Call me boring, call me whatever. I just want that one thing because I'm going after the goal. So that is what I would say is the difference of people that are successful, at least from what I have seen. And the other thing I would say is they are fanatical about protecting their time. They, just like you said about your perfect day, they are fanatical. And so what the way that I do it is as you know, and you have one as well, I've got a virtual assistant, right? My virtual assistant protects my calendar. That's how I protect my day. And you know what? I've got to be strict. And I tell people, it's not that I don't want to say no to talking to people. If I'm saying yes to you, what I'm saying no to something else. I can't do, there's no such thing. Multitasking doesn't exist. It's alternative tasking. Your brain can't I couldn't land an airplane and juggle at the same time, or you wouldn't want me to. You'd say, hey man, pick one or the other. Don't do both of those. So you can't do both. We think we can, but you're actually alternating very quickly. So I tell people, if I say yes to you, what am I saying no to? And no offense, but do you deserve my time? Like, what are you doing that I don't get that hour back. If I talk to someone, I'm not getting that hour back. So are you going to do something with it? Because, the one thing that pisses me off the most is when someone asks for my time and I give it to them and they don't do anything with it. And I'm like, well, why'd you ask? And I'm sure you get the same thing where you talk to people. And the people that I found that are successful, they're very respectful of time and they know exactly what they want. So when we have a meeting, we talk, they know what they want, they know the outcome, and we're done. And if we can answer the conversation in 5 minutes, it's done. Okay, we good? We're good? Okay, good. Let's move out. And so that's what I've noticed.
No, you're incredibly right on all levels. I mean, I'm incredibly protective of my time, and Shauna controls my schedule, and literally we have strict rules. Like, I'm not even allowed to put things in my calendar unless it's a weekend or a special event. Like, that's it. Like, otherwise I bury myself. Just like most entrepreneurs, like we want to do everything, and that's the problem. And back in a prior life, not too long ago, I was that guy like, ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. There's all these things you can do to make money. So then all of a sudden you find yourself doing all these. And it wasn't until I became an absolute specialist where I said, like you, no to a lot of things. People come to me all the time, hey, can you help me with this? No, but you can call this guy. No, but you can call this guy. Every time I say no, I'm giving up money because that's money I could make. That's a coaching client I could take on. But also I'm protective of my time and I understand what my time is worth. So if I say no to them, it's because I know I can do better and I can't serve them in the capacity I want to. I can't solve their problem. If I just take them on, I'm kidding myself that I have enough time to actually spend it on them to solve a real problem. And if we're not out there solving problems, we're just running ourselves in circles. That's what success is solving other people's problems. Our problem will be solved out of the nature of doing that. And the other thing too, I want to talk about, because this comes up often, and I talk to hundreds, if not even thousands of people, people, I think deep down, they want to do what's right for themselves. They really have a good plan for what they're going to do, but then they talk to someone in their life, family member, maybe a significant other or a spouse, and that person dictates their life. So what do you have to say about that external obstacle that people have to face of other people wanting them to conform to what other people think they should be doing?
I got a lot to say about that. Because this is common, right? We all deal with this. So I have learned to compartmentalize. And what I mean by that is I call it 3-3-3 forever. So you have a 3-minute friend. 3-minute friend is maybe someone you know at work. Maybe you know them at the gym. You don't talk to them. You talk about stupid stuff for 3 minutes and then you really don't care about each other, but you're just being cordial. That's a 3-minute friend. So I've learned to compartmentalize that person, right? So when I'm at the gym, I don't talk about real estate. I don't talk about flying. I talk about working out, right? That's the 3-minute friend. The 3-hour friend is maybe someone that you do real estate together. You're both in the industry and you go to happy hours together, maybe go to lunch and, hey, we should do something. And that's it. Maybe you know them for a year or two, and that's a 3-hour friend and you've got some common interests. The 3-week friend is somebody that you've known for maybe a family friend and you go on family vacations and your kids play together and you know each other. Maybe you don't even do any business together, but you just generally like them. And the forever friends are the people that you grew up with, right? The old neighborhood that you could probably count on one hand that you could rely on. Now, the forever friend are people that you could call them at 2 a.m. and be like, hey, don't ask, I need bail money, just get here. And they go, I'll be right there. You're not gonna call a 3-minute friend and be like, hey man, I need you to come pick me up from jail, hurry up. So you've gotta learn who you associate with and who you talk to. The guys that I grew up with out in the neighborhood, I don't talk about flying or real estate. I talk about that stuff with them. So look, we especially when you're new to investing, you want people to basically tell you, yeah, that's good, you should do it. But the problem is 70% of the thoughts that go through our heads are negative, right? So we're always geared towards worst case scenario. So whenever you tell someone that you're doing something new that's out of their comfort zone, they never think like, oh man, you could be a millionaire. They're gonna go, man, tenants, toilets, turmoil, why would you deal with that? Everybody's going to gravitate towards the worst case scenario. It's like crabs pulling you back into the bucket. So why would you put yourself through that instead of going, you know what, I'm going to talk to my real estate friends about real estate. And I'm going to talk to my bike riding friends about bike riding. I'm not going to mix the two. So as an airline pilot, I never talk about real estate when I'm flying. And if you notice, even on social media, I don't normally mix the two. I may do flying stuff, and I may do real estate stuff, but I don't normally mix the two of those conversations because to me, I've just learned to compartmentalize. I don't know if that's good or bad. That's just how I am able to associate with it. And when I'm flying, they'll go, oh, are you that real estate guy? I'm like, I don't know if I'm that guy. I'm a guy that does real estate. I don't know if I'm that guy. And so I've learned to keep them separate because I don't need to convince someone that I should do real estate. I really don't care what they think because why should I convince them of something? Because they're always going to go worst case scenario. No, how many times have you told someone that didn't know anything about real estate or anything about money and they go, man, you're going to be a millionaire? It doesn't work that way. They always go to worst case scenario. So why even put yourself in that position? So going back to answer your question, I think it's very, very important to learn compartmentalization of who you talk to, what you say, and sometimes you don't say anything. Sometimes it's better just to be quiet and listen because there's a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it accordingly is what I tell people.
I love it. And then, another important topic is a lot of people want to relate success to, oh, you know that guy, or you're in this thing, or maybe to you, oh, you're associated with bigger pockets. That's why you're having success. Like, how important is the network? And then if you don't have the network, how do you build that network to support you in your goals and what you're trying to do?
I think your network is everything, in my opinion. I think that, Bradley, I'm friends with Bradley, the dropping bombs and Lightspeed. And he always says, hey, the more hands you shake, the more money you make, right? The more people you help get up the hill, you will get up the hill. So I'm a big connector like you. I always help people. And that's the reason that my circle of influence has grown and grown and grown because I'm selfless in the fact that I give information all the time. I have a mastermind. It's all like-minded investors, right? So I have this mastermind that people can join. It's once a week. But what's interesting is the people that I bring on to speak in the mastermind. So I bring on these top level people from bigger pockets, from other, Tim Bratz that owns 4,700 units. I have Ashley Kerr, the Real Estate Rookie podcast shows, Ashley. I get these people on. Why? Because I help and I give back all the time. If I was constrictive and I never shared my knowledge or shared my information, these people would never know who I am, and I would never be able to give. I can give Brandon Turner a call and be like, hey man, can I bend your ear? I need something, and he'll take my call and we'll talk and everything. I don't think most people could have that because they think that they need to constrict their thoughts. I'm the opposite, and most people that are successful, you are the same as me. We give all of our information out. So I think that people that have large circles of influence, as long as they're not doing it for some other means, right? If they're doing it because they want to help, you will see that they in generally are the most successful people out there. The ones that are not end up getting kind of filtered out through the system, right? When they have ulterior motives. But in general, I think that your circle represents a big representation of who you are. And even in the airline industry, I go to the airport and I run into people all the time and from the airline, whole other world, but I know them because I kind of mix with them, right? And I connect people. So it's not just real estate. I think it's your whole life. And I think that's indicative of who you are and how successful you'll be.
That's a really, really good way to explain that. I want to talk about your book, Building an Empire, Failing Our Way to Millions. So this book is powerful, but can you just talk a little bit about what inspired you to write a book? I mean, you're doing a lot of things, but what did you write it when you were flying the plane? How did you find time to write a book and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when I was getting mentored, one of our mentors was, I was trying to get on more stages and I was doing a tour. I just got asked to go to Australia and tour Australia. And my mentor, who's a very, very influential person in the industry, he says, "Hey man, you need a book." I'm like, "A book?" He's like, "You got to have a book." He's like, "If you want to be taken seriously on the circuit and speaking, you got to have a book." I'm like, "I don't have a story." He's like, "Everyone has a story. Write yours." And I'm like, okay. So basically that was how I wrote the book. He's like, "You want to be credible, you want to be taken seriously, become a published author." I'm like, okay. So I just start writing, and it took me about a year and a half to write this because I was like, I had no idea. I didn't know how does someone write a book, So I just started with outlines and I just started filling in these outlines and just started telling my story. And it's funny, and a lot of people that read this book, they're like, man, and everything that we talked about today is pretty much in this book along with some other stuff, but they're like, "I cannot believe how many times you failed." I cannot, these stories, even the guy the ghostwriter who basically made it sound like it wasn't a third grader that wrote it. He's like, "Man," he goes, "I got to tell you," he goes, "I laughed at your stories." He goes, "You should have a movie." He goes, "Your stories are so funny." I'm like, "I wish they were fake." I'm like, "I wish they didn't happen to me." But look, in my point of writing the book, after I started getting into this, look, everybody has trials and tribulations. Everybody gets punched in the face. If you're not trying hard enough and you're not failing, you're doing something wrong. And failing at something doesn't define you. Being a failure and never getting back up, that defines you. And there was no way I was going to fail. People read this book and man, I have a whole set of admiration for you because nothing, like you said, people say "Oh, bigger pockets," and you speak on stage, and we talked earlier, I was on an event that Ed Milet and Brad Lee were speaking. I'm in there with these guys and it was awesome. And I'm like, that doesn't just happen. They don't just gift this stuff to you. You have to prove yourself. And that is only proven over time of failing. And every single one of those guys, you talk to anyone, as you know, they've all failed. Grant Cardone, everybody has gone through these trials and tribulations. So I just, I wrote my story as I saw it. And, that was just up until us selling our business. I've had some people approach me about doing the 2.0 version of after we sold our business and what we're doing. So I may do a secondary book. I don't know, but it's interesting reflecting on your life. And I remember listening to a show with David Goggins, the famous Navy SEAL, and he says, everybody writes a book. You write a page of your life every day. The problem is nobody ever goes back and reads that page. So you're constantly writing a new page, but you never go back and look at it. And so this was a good way for me to reflect back on my life and be like, wow, I've done a lot of good things. I've done a lot of stupid things. I've done a lot of things that looking back made no sense. And there was no way it was ever going to work, but I wouldn't have known that. And I tell people my success and who I am today is a direct reflection of my failures. If I never failed at the level that I failed, I would not be where I am today, without a doubt. And you don't know that until you go through it. And, I always tell people look, there's a lesson here. Of course, when you get ripped off by a contractor or a tenant trashes your property or you buy wrong something, it's very hard to go, hey, I wonder what the lesson is here for me today. It's not that easy. I get that. But when emotions subside and you let it all settle and you look at it objectively and you go, okay, is there anything that I could have done differently to prevent this from happening? Maybe better screening processes, maybe vetting the contractors better, maybe knowing my numbers better. Is there something that I could take away from that? And if there's not, then I would say that you have a you problem it's normally a system problem, but if you can't figure out anything that you did wrong, there's an ego problem in there, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, the ego problem is a big problem, but that's a whole nother topic.
That's another conversation.
Woo. So how would people get around your campfire? I mean, you got all this stuff going on. Your mastermind, it's every single week. How do people get around that campfire?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. It's steverozenberg.com. So it's Rozenberg, steverozenberg.com. They can sign up there. They can follow me on Instagram, Rozenberg Steve, or Facebook, Steve Rozenberg. I got a YouTube channel. And so, again, they can find me. They can join the mastermind. I do one-on-one coaching. I try to encompass. I'm probably the only one. We didn't mention this. And, I have a full immersive interactive course that sits on Bradley's Lightspeed system. That's basically shows people how to go from 0 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 and beyond. But it's the mindset side. It's who you have to become and change mentally. Like, how do you go home and tell your wife, I want to buy real estate, and have her be on board for the next 5 years? And how do you explain the trials and tribulations you're about to go through as an investor? Nobody talks about that. Everyone tells you how to flip, how to wholesale, but nobody ever says, why should you flip, or why should you wholesale, or why should you buy and hold? So I go into the why part, and that's kind of something that, I'm known for, and I talk a lot about, but I think it's very, very misplaced in the industry. So I created a whole course on this. And if you go to my website, you can see it and stuff, but it's just a way for me to give back. And it's something that I really try to do.
Yeah, folks. So you really need to go to this website. I'm on it now, and there's a lot on here, a lot of really cool stuff. He's got a free course too. So a lot of people like to dip their toe in before they actually, get in up to their belly. So you got a free course you can check out. So by all means, check Steve out, start following him. I mean, you'll see he's got awesome posts he puts up on Instagram and Facebook. So get around the campfire, folks. You won't be sorry. I mean, you've heard the story. This is somebody that can help get you to the next level. So Steve, what anything in final parting, what would be one of the best pieces of advice you could give? Go.
I would say the best advice I could give is figure out your destination. And before you swing that axe and buy any properties, figure it out and work it backwards, right? Don't start from the beginning and go forwards. Figure out the end, work it backwards. And once you know that, your why will carry you through the dark days and the self-doubt, because you'll always have your eye downrange of where you're going, and you'll always know the reason you're doing it. And, we do this to have a lifestyle for us and for our family. Remember that you're doing this not just for money, you're doing this for a lifestyle, for generational wealth. And you've got to remember that. And you've always got to keep that present in your mind, because you're going to have dark days. You're going to have things go wrong. That doesn't define you. Knowing where you're going will keep you on track. And that's what I would part with.
That was great. So folks, you heard it there. So get around the campfire, make it happen. You remember I said it earlier, the knowledge is not the important thing. You just got a ton of knowledge. You just heard a ton of unbelievable stories, and there's more where they came from, but that's not the important thing. Taking action is. Get on his website, check him out on social media, and start taking action. Otherwise, nothing is going to change. Steve, thanks for joining us on the show. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, folks. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Real Estate Money School. We will see you on the next one.